All right, today we're diving into a horticultural technique that honestly feels a bit like magic, maybe even science fiction. But it's actually been around for thousands of years. We're talking about cloning plants, but get this, you do it right on the branch, while it's still attached to the tree. So, let's unpack how that's even possible.
So let me ask you this. What if you could just skip all those years it takes to grow a tree from a tiny seed? What if, instead, you could just talk a mature branch into growing its own set of roots, right there in midair, while it's still getting all its food from the parent plant? I know, it sounds pretty out there, but that is the exact idea behind this amazing technique called air layering.
So air layering, you might also hear it called marcotage or Chinese layering, is a way to propagate a plant where you actually convince the stem to grow roots while it's still a part of the parent. And that right there is the key difference from taking a normal cutting. With a cutting, you chop it off and hope for the best, right? Here, the branch stays connected, it's safe, it's secure, and it's getting a steady supply of nutrients from the main plant the entire time.
Okay, but how in the world do you trick a branch into growing a whole new root system? I mean, that's not what it's supposed to do. Well, it all comes down to some really clever biological trickery. Let's pull back the curtain and get into the science of how these new roots actually pop into existence.
The secret sauce here is all about messing with the plant's internal plumbing. You got to think of a stem like a two-way highway. You've got the xylem, which is like the northbound lane, bringing water and minerals up from the roots. And then you've got the phloem, the southbound lane, sending sugars and hormones down from the leaves. Air layering is basically a vascular heist. You very carefully sever the southbound lane, the phloem, but you leave the northbound lane, the xylem, completely untouched. So the branch still gets all the water it needs to survive, but
all those goodies, all those sugars and growth hormones heading south in the phloem, they suddenly hit a roadblock, a dead end. They can't go any further down the plant. And this creates this huge traffic jam of energy and resources, all piling up right at the spot where you made the cut. It's this super concentrated, high-energy zone that's just perfect for fueling the growth of something brand new.
So what happens next in the plant is pretty cool, and it happens in 3 stages. First, the wound itself acts like an alarm, sending out chemical stress signals. Then, all those plant hormones we talked about, especially ones called auxins, start to gather right near the cut. And finally, you get this transition phase. The cells in that area, now swimming in this rich hormonal soup, basically get reprogrammed. They're told, okay, you're not stem cells anymore, your new job is to become roots. And that's exactly what they do.
So that's the why it works. The science is pretty elegant, right? But now, let's get practical. How do you actually do this yourself on a plant in your garden? Let's talk about the actual how-to and the tools you'll need. Okay, for most woody plants, the go-to technique is called the ring bark or girdle method. First, you pick a nice, healthy-looking stem from last year's growth. Then you're going to carefully remove a complete ring of bark, about 1 inch to 1.5 inches wide. You cut down until you see the hard white tissue inside. That's the xylem. Now listen up, because this next part is the most important step. You have to scrape that white xylem clean. I mean, really clean. If you leave any of that thin, greenish layer, the cambium, behind, the plant will just heal itself, it'll bridge the gap, and poof, no roots for you. So scrape, scrape, scrape. Now to really stack the deck in your favor, you can use rooting hormones. The most common one you'll see is called IBA. It's basically the main catalyst that tells the plant, hey, make roots here. For really tough-to-root plants like teak, studies have found that mixing that IBA with thiamine, vitamin B1, creates this incredible synergy that just skyrockets the success rate. And you can see here just how scientific this can get, with different agents doing different jobs, like improving root length or helping move food to the wound site.
All right, so you've made the cut, you've applied your hormone, now you need to wrap it all up in a moist medium. For decades, the gold standard was sphagnum moss, but check this out. A recent study on breadfruit plants found that cocoa coir, which is a byproduct of coconuts, stuff we used to just throw away, had a success rate of over 91%. That absolutely blows sphagnum moss out of the water. And the reason is that cocoa coir holds the perfect amount of moisture without getting waterlogged, so the new roots get plenty of oxygen.
Okay, last step before you just have to be patient. You need to wrap the whole bundle up to block out all the light. See, roots naturally grow away from light. It's a thing called negative phototropism. A great pro tip is to use aluminum foil. It completely blocks the light and it reflects the sun's heat, which keeps those delicate new roots from getting cooked. On the flip side, if you're in a cooler climate, You could use black plastic to absorb a little extra warmth and speed things up.
You know, even though we're talking about plastic wrap and modern hormones, this technique is anything but new. This is a practice that's been honed and perfected over an incredible 4,000-year journey. It literally evolved from a simple observation in nature into a really sophisticated science.
And this timeline just lays it all out so perfectly. I mean, think about it. It starts 4,000 years ago in ancient China, where growers were literally packing mud into split clay pots and tying them around a branch. Then you fast forward to the 19th century, and you've got European horticulturists getting fancy with specialized glass containers. But the real game changer, the thing that took this from a secret of the pros and gave it to everybody, the 1950s and the invention of polyethylene film, plastic wrap. All of a sudden, it was cheap, it was easy, it was accessible, and today, of course, we've got these slick, reusable rooting pods that make the whole process even simpler.
So now we know the science, we know the history, which brings us to the big question. Is air layering right for you? When should you actually use this technique? Let's break down the pros, the cons, and the absolutely critical final steps.
Okay, the number one advantage, hands down, is the super high success rate, especially for plants that are just notoriously difficult to root from a simple cutting. Plus, you can propagate a way bigger branch, which means you get a much more mature plant way faster. On the flip side, yeah, it is more work than just snipping a few cuttings. And this is important. The new plant is on its own roots. This means you lose any special traits from a rootstock, that hardy base that plants are often grafted onto to make them smaller or more disease-resistant.
So what kinds of plants are we talking about here? Well, things like citrus trees, figs, and Japanese maples are all prime candidates. They usually root in just a couple of months. In fact, figs are so easy you probably don't even need rooting hormone. But this is also about managing your expectations. You can air layer conifers, like pine trees, but you better be patient. We're talking 12 to, get this, 24 months before you see a solid root system. So yeah, patience is key.
All right, so you've waited weeks, maybe months, and you finally see it. A bundle packed with beautiful, healthy new roots. So you grab your pruners, snip the branch off the parent tree, and you're done. Right? Nope. Not even close. As this quote points out, that very moment of separation, that is actually the most critical, most dangerous phase for your brand new plant.
Think about it. Those new roots are super fragile. They've been coddled their whole existence, and they are definitely not ready to support a big, thirsty canopy of leaves all on their own. So you need what's called a weaning strategy. First, you have to prune back some of the top growth to reduce the water demand. Then, you put it in a shady, high-humidity spot, like under a plastic tent. You got to stake it carefully so the fragile root ball doesn't snap right off, and then over the next 2 to 4 weeks, you have to slowly harden it off, gradually getting it used to more light and less humidity.
And that's the whole story. Air layering is this just incredible blend of pure plant biology and good old-fashioned patience. It's a way for us to create a mature, perfect, genetically identical clone, turning one plant you absolutely love into many. So really, the only question left to ask is, what plant are you going to clone first?